I was recently working with a highly technical engineering team, and I was talking to them about the impacts of relationships, connections, managing conflict, and how it can impact results. And we were getting into some great dialogue, and their lead engineer raised his hand and said, "Sean, I don't buy it." "What don't you buy?" He goes, "I don't buy it. I am paid by my organization to get results, none of this fluffy people stuff that you guys talk about." I stopped and I thought about it for a few minutes and I go, let me write up on the whiteboard. And so I wrote up on the whiteboard a very simple equation. And that equation says that our optimal results that we can accomplish is really a summation of our potential production times our strength of relationships. Have you ever been in a situation where there's tension, frustration, irritability, anger, lack of trust? How productive were you? How productive were the results that came out of that organization? Probably pretty lacking, right? It's because the strength of relationships was not there in that situation. So looking at this very simple equation, we've got potential production. That's the amount of production we could possibly achieve given our current equipment, resource levels, processes. That's our potential production. That's what we could potentially achieve. And then we multiply that by our strength of relationships. In fact, we can actually put both of those on a scale of 1 to 10. Let's say our potential production maybe is an 8. I would define an 8 as we've got really great processes. They're pretty much well defined, not a lot of loss within those. We've got high functioning equipment. We've got well trained staff. Everybody knows their technical side of their roles. I'd call that an 8. And then on the other side of this equation, we've got a 4. The strength of relationships is a 4. In fact, these were the two numbers that after I went through this exercise with this engineering team, that's what they came up with, that they were an 8 on the potential production, but they were a 4 on their strength of relationships. So now what does a 4 look like on strength of relationships? Lack of trust, infighting, tension, a lot of people working around others, silos within their own groups, within their own organization. They were a 4. So therefore, they were a total optimal results of 32. Now, for my non-engineering people, how did I get to that? That's an 8 for potential production and a 4 for strength of relationships. Multiply them, 32. What does a 32 mean? Well, our optimal result is 100. That'd be a 10 times 10. And they got a 32. What does that mean? That means that 68% was left on the table. 68% of what they could achieve was left on the table. Now, what most leaders do is that when they want to try to increase the results of their organization, they go back to potential production. Let's see if we can optimize our results through better processes, better tools, better resources, more staff, better training. What if they could spend a boatload of money, change that 8 to a 9? Well, they'd be at a 36 now. But they spend a lot of money to be able to get there. This really comes down to a return on investment that we can have within our own teams, within our own organizations. I can either spend a lot of money to try to change that 8 into a 9 on potential production, or let's see if I could change that 4 into a 7 through spending significantly less money and focus on how do we communicate? How do we manage conflict? How do we interact with each other? Through that improvement, if I could change that 4 into a 7, now we have measured, marked improvements in our optimal results. It really comes down to where's your best investment of time. For some people, that is in potential production. For some teams, they need to look at, do we have the right systems? Do we have the right tools? Are we moving in the right direction? Do we have that right strategic plan from a potential production standpoint? But for many other teams, we need to look at the other side of the equation. Why don't they? Why don't they look at strength of relationships? I can't measure it. It's hard. It's uncomfortable, and I've never done it before. All of those answers can be overcome. I can measure it. I can show you how we can turn better communication, better relationships, better leadership into better results every time. And that's where we come into play.